It's Brian Preston, the money guy.
I love this transition, Bo, because this is one of those things where we talked about great power comes great responsibility. That kind of, to me, means success. And I think a lot of people in this consumer world we all live in, we think, you know what? The wealthy, they show what they got. You know, the richer you are, the more you should drive the fancy car, live in the big house. Let's kind of explore this with a clip that's out there.
Yeah, this is another clip. This is from the early 2000s superhero movie. And this is a clip, maybe you don't remember it, but I bet you have heard some piece of this saying, some piece of this thought in the past.
The next time you feel like showing off, don't.
The next time you feel like showing off, don't. This is very wise words from Charles Xavier, also known as Professor X, telling some of his folks, some of his other mutants, I guess, hey, just because you can show yourself off, just because you can do something, doesn't mean that necessarily you should be doing that.
Well, I mean, think about this. I mean, I know I had this vision when I was 16, turned 25, go buy the Corvette, had all these goals and dreams. And then what's funny is you reach these points and you're like, I don't want that.
I don't want a Corvette anymore.
So the reality is the more success you have, I think you'll find that those tokens, those trinkets, don't really have as much value because you don't have to fake it. You don't have to try to pretend. I mean, think about when you go to Vegas. If every one of the big mega resort casinos has a mall attached to it and they have all the luxury brands there, is that all rich people in there buying that stuff? No, or is that all the people who come in there happen to get a little lucky and blow it on some of these brands because they perceive that's what they're supposed to do when they get a little bit of extra money. Now, Bo, you actually knew who this gentleman was in this clip, and I thought this was profound. So kind of set this up because this is exactly what I'm talking about on the power of stealth wealth. Yeah,
it was interesting. I was on the internet the other day, and I saw this clip come up, and I recognized this person. He's a musician who's been around for a long time, and he was talking about something so interesting because, you know, my wife will often say to me, we'll see someone who's driving a really nice car, someone who has a really nice house, and she'll say, oh man, that person they must be really, really wealthy. And I remind her that like really nice things are not a sign of someone who has money. It's a sign of someone who has the ability to spend money, right? It's very, very different. And so we found this clip and I thought this was so appropriate. I thought it fit so well that we want to share. This is from Bun B, who is a famous rapper talking about another musician.
Jay-Z is getting richer and richer, and he's wearing less and less shit that look rich. Does anybody notice that? Hov is the one that's taking these meetings with other wealthy people. And you keep going in these rooms with these people trying to look like money. No, you've got to sound like money and think like money.
My God.
Because all that is a bluff to these people. Wealthy doesn't have to prove to anybody that they're wealthy.
Oh, I love that.
I mean, I think that is so. I wish I'd have said it. I mean, I don't know if I need the crow sounds because he's obviously using some adult language there.
Fantastic editing there, Daniel. Thank you so much.
But it is the what he's saying is if you can catch it, speaks volumes about what we're always talking about with stealth wealth and other things. And think about there's so many memes out there of these young billionaires and they're in their hoodies. They don't have the fancy watches. Their tennis shoes look like they're falling apart. You're like, why do they look like they could live under a bridge and be comfortable versus everybody you see at all the designer stores and all driving the luxury brands? How is it? There's a disconnect, obviously, with what's presented to the reality of what we live in once you actually have $1 billion.
Yeah, he said you don't need to try to look wealthy. You need to sound wealthy, know what you're talking about. You need to think like wealthy people think. And one of the ways that wealthy people think is not this show-off style. It's not this, hey, look at me, look what I have done. We say this all the time, Brian. It is much cooler, being wealthy than looking wealthy.
Yeah.
Because looking wealthy can put you in a bad spot because it's just like you said, you fake it until you make it. When you really peel back the curtain and look at folks who actually have means, have had some success, have been able to build wealth, I think it looks very different from what society's view and picture of wealth actually is.
I thought it was interesting because in that, I know everybody out there watching or listening on the podcast can't see that the video clip that we just played also showed him in a room with Warren Buffett and other big money players. And I think back to the whole Warren Buffett documentary that was on HBO, and they showed Warren Buffett's daily habit of he goes through the McDonald's drive-through, gets an Egg McMuffin, value meal. When we had Clark Howard on, we got completely harassed by him for putting him in a nice hotel. The first thing he said he was excited about is he was in walking distance to McDonald's, so he could go get his Egg McMuffin in the morning. It is amazing how wealth doesn't do what you think it would do because we're being sold a false bill of sale on being a consumer. Go ahead and burn through the resources that you get with your labor versus, no, you actually could be a builder of something pretty incredible.
Yeah, there was a great book that came out in 2009 called Stop Acting Rich. And they kind of walked through what are some of the consumer habits of millionaires. And we just pulled a few that we thought were interesting. Now, again, this is 2009. So yeah, factor in inflation. It was over a decade ago. But on average, millionaires only spend about $16 on haircuts. They're not out getting like super, super expensive haircuts. 4 in 10 millionaires own a bottle of wine under $10. Brian, I fall into this category, actually. One of our favorite bottles of wine is a very, very inexpensive bottle.
I'm drinking that $2 Chuck.
That's right. That's kind of comes in a box in a bag.
Or whatever.
And they spend about $31,300 on automobiles. They're not out there buying $100,000, $200,000 supercars. They're buying very reasonable, very logical automobiles. And so what you can see is even though millionaires have the ability, they could go out and buy the Corvette. They say, you know what, maybe I don't need that. If that doesn't bring me utility, if that's not something that actually is part of my why, part of my goal, I'm not going to pursue that.
So, but we could double these numbers. I mean, because this is 2009. Sure. You could double these numbers to bring it more relevant because I think 32 on haircuts, 20 for bottles of wine, 63,000 for the car. You're still having a very similar discussion. And by the way, tell me you're from South Atlanta without telling me you're from South Atlanta when you brought up my Corvette, because that's we're both from South Atlanta. But it is, it is to the point of on luxury brands. You don't have to fake it.
That's right.
I mean, and that's the big thing that I think is important about this. Figure out what makes you happy. And then here's what I want to talk about. If it's not about consumerism, if it's more about this stealth wealth, because we know true wealth you can't see because it's working in the background. It's helping you. So you, instead of trading your labor for, the ability of you're taking your time and labor to create money. Now your money's working in the background, your army of dollar bills. We've actually created a great resource to help you kind of figure out how are you doing, to keep score, to keep track, to know what changes are going on in your financial life. So I would encourage you, go to learn.moneyguy.com. We have a net worth tool so you can see how well that stealth wealth is growing in the background so that when you're in the room with Warren Buffett in the future, you'll know whether you belong or not.
And what I love about this is if you start tracking your net worth every single year, it 100% will start informing the decisions you make because you start thinking, oh man, if I'm going to buy this automobile, do I really want the expensive one that's going to be worth 70 to 80% less next year? Or do I want to buy a more reasonable automobile and go max out my Roth and go max out my 401k? And as you begin to see that start taking shape on your net worth statement, we'll see our dashboard, we have a journey to abundance showing how you're building towards financial independence. It is amazing. And I think it can be transforming in how you approach making money and financial decisions.